Colleagues, we will begin at 10:37, which is in 1 minute's time. Good morning and welcome to the officials from the Ministry of Works and Transport, the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Auditor General's Department. My name is Devendranath Tanku and I'm the chairman of this Public Accounts Committee. The Public Accounts Committee has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, appropriation accounts of monies expended out of sums granted by Parliament to meet the public expenditure of Trinidad and Tobago, B, such other accounts as may be referred to the committee by the House of Representatives or as are authorized or required to be considered by the committee under any other enactment, and C, the report of the Auditor General on such accounts. Please note that the purpose of this meeting is for the Public Accounts Committee to conduct an examination of the reports of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2013 to 2019, and to follow up on the implementation of the recommendations made in the 18th Public Accounts Committee report of the 11th Parliament on an examination of the reports of the Auditor General on the financial statements of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2008 to 2012. To assess whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it, to determine the challenges being faced by the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago in implementing the committee's recommendations and possible solutions to these challenges, and to assist the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago in achieving the efficient delivery of services while ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. Based on the issues identified, the following representatives were invited to today's public hearing: the Ministry of Works and Transport, the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Auditor General's Department. Please note as well that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, on Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send in their comments related to today's inquiry via email parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, Twitter @ttparliament. I will now invite members of the Public Accounts Committee assembled here today to introduce yourselves, beginning with Vice Chair.
My name is Julie. Good morning. I am Ayana Webster-Roy, member.
Thank you, members. I now ask officials from the Ministry of Works and Transport to introduce yourselves, please.
Hello, good morning. My name is Sonia Francis Harewood, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Works and Transport.
Good morning. Shrusati Siram, Senior Economist, Ministry of Works and Transport.
Thank you very much. May I ask members of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago here today to introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. My name is James Philbert. I'm the Deputy Chairman of the Airports Authority Board.
Good morning, Chairman. My name is Hayden Newton. I'm the General Manager of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Chairman and members. My name is Albert Griffith. I'm the Deputy General Manager Security at the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Chairman and members. I'm Emmanuel Barr, Deputy General Manager, Estates Planning and Business Development of Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Chairman. My name is Carmela Wallace-Shanklin. I am the Financial Controller of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, members. Now I would like to get introductions from the Auditor General's Department.
Good morning, all. Gary Peters, Assistant Auditor General.
Good morning, all. Anisha Bash, Audit Director.
Good morning, all. Saraswati Frank, Assistant Auditor Director of the General's Department.
Thank you very much. As we move on, I would like to invite a representative from the Auditor General's Department to make a brief opening statement. I assume that's going to be you, sir, so Assistant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee, Permanent Secretary, management of the authority, members of the viewing public. Section 20 of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago Act states the accounts of the authority shall be audited annually by the Auditor General or by a qualified auditor appointed by the Auditor General. As stated previously, we're looking at 2013 to 2019. For the years 2013 to 2016, those years were conducted by auditors appointed by the Auditor General, and from 2016 to 2019, those were conducted by us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peters. May I invite the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Works and Transport, to make a brief opening statement.
Once again, good morning, Chairman, Vice Chair, and members of the Public Accounts Committee, colleagues from the Airports Authority and the Auditor General's Department, and members of the listening and viewing public. The Ministry of Works and Transport is the line ministry with responsibility for the Airports Authority. In this context, the ministry undertakes general oversight of the authority and provides assistance and advice as necessary to support the authority in the execution of its mandate and government-stated policies. In particular, with reference to the financial statements of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, the Auditor General has outlined the mechanism utilized to undertake same and how it has been done over the period under review. In addition, the Ministry has noted that its ministerial response to the recommendations of the Public Accounts Committee contained in the committee's 18th report on the examination of the audited financial statements of the AATT for the period 2008 to 2012 was recorded as not being received. In this regard, I just wish to clarify that in fact, we did provide responses. We have it recorded via correspondence dated September 10, 2018 and October 30th, 2018, respectively. In noting that we also submitted it once again via correspondence dated December 12, 2023. The Ministry appreciates the opportunity to engage with the Public Accounts Committee in this important inquiry and assures full cooperation by providing any necessary additional information to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Permanent Secretary. I now invite the General Manager of the Airports Authority to make a brief opening statement, or the Deputy Chairman, whoever is willing to represent the Airports Authority at this point.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning again. Thank you, Chair, and good morning to Chair and Vice Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and to your listening and viewing public. We thank you for the opportunity to present today on the business of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. First of all, let me apologize for our chairman who is out of the jurisdiction on his employment business. The strategic significance of the airport, the PIACO, and the ANR Airport, International Airport, goes beyond mere transportation stations. Our airports are multi-purpose commercial centers, vital engines that stimulate national economic growth, facilitate trade, and promote global engagement. Our airports serve as catalysts for tourism, trade, and investment, and play a pivotal role in our nation's progress. In alignment with national development goals, Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago remains firmly set on a strategic path to lead the provision of safe and secure aviation services and diverse and innovative aviation business. When the COVID-19 global pandemic emerged in 2020, the authority was presented with an unprecedented challenge that impacted the aviation sector uniquely. With international borders closed to commercial traffic, the decline in both aeronautical and non-aeronautical revenue was severe. The agility and resilience of the organization enable us to respond positively and ensure continuous operations. We lost more than 95% of our revenues. Today, however, we are on a new route to a robust recovery. A significant rebound in travel, passenger throughput, is back up to 90% of pre-COVID figures. Our airport environment is a complex ecosystem, and our strategic focus of the authority is to improve infrastructure, ensure operational efficiency, facilitate and attract new business, maximize aeronautical and non-aeronautical revenue through superior business processes, systems, tools, and people, achieve excellence in customer service and stakeholder relations, enhance safety and systems, and ensure that the key pillars of transparency and accountability are adhered to, so that we can build public trust and confidence. Notwithstanding the challenges, our efforts have been recognized by Skytrax, where we have ranked Best Airport in the Caribbean for 3 consecutive years. In 2018, the World Economic Forum also placed the Piaco International Airport as second in the Latin America and Caribbean region in terms of airport infrastructure. At the end of the fiscal 2023, the authority ended with a surplus of $2.8 million in relation to the earning before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which represented a significant achievement given the severe deficits in the 3 prior years. We will continue to strive to meet our mandate to develop them and manage the business of the airports, including the development, maintenance, and improvement of the airport's facilities in a cost-effective manner, so as to ensure the availability of efficient, secure, and safe aviation services to the public at all times, as well as to ensure commercial viability. The authority stands ready to answer your questions, and we look forward to the recommendations of this esteemed committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chairman. The way we will proceed is that the Chairman will initiate some initial questions, and then we open the floor to other members who will also ask you some questions. I want to begin just with a clarification, Mr. Deputy Chair, based on something you just mentioned. You said that the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago generated a $2.8 million surplus. Is that an operating profit, or is that overall?
It is. I will defer to the manager.
It's in the realm of the operating profit, because we are looking here at the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which is the EBITDA, which really is the critical metric for an airport the size of 1 to 5 million passengers. The Airport Council International has indicated that that is the critical profitability metric, and we were able to gain a surplus in that year.
Thank you. We'll get back to EBITDA in a little bit, but for now I want to focus, interestingly enough, not necessarily on the Airports Authority yet, but on the Ministry of Works and Transport. Madam Permanent Secretary, based on the submissions of the Ministry to your committee, you had indicated that the oversight role of the Ministry, with regards to the Airports Authority, related to assessing the financial status of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and any concerns regarding its financial sustainability in the medium and long term. That was on page 4 of your submission to the committee. Based on that, the Ministry's assessment is that the Airports Authority, and I quote, satisfactorily maintains its obligations under the various legislative and national policy documents, end quote. My question to you, Madam Permanent Secretary, is were there any areas where the Airports Authority was less than satisfactory and where the Ministry made specific recommendations or provided assistance for improvements in those metrics?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm walking the metrics through my mind in terms of less than satisfactory. What we tend to do in respect of the Airports Authority is that we would sit together and we would come to agreement as to where we are going via our strategic plan, via our capital program, etc. As we move through the year, we would meet with the Airports Authority on a regular basis, in particular as it relates to its capital program, to try to identify whether or not we are meeting the targets that we would have set. There are times when we have identified shortfalls, and that is when we sit together and we try to come up with solutions, in particular as it speaks to implementation of certain things. So I would say that our relationship is somewhat of an ongoing relationship. We have not had cause thus far to not have proper responses from the Airports Authority when we identify that we have not reached targets. I'm wondering if I'm answering your question.
You are.
Thank you.
You are, because other questions will follow
Yes.
from my colleagues based on human resources, etc., etc. So those questions will follow. I just wanted to verify that there's such a that there's a good harmonious relationship between the Ministry of Works and Transport and the Airports Authority in terms of ensuring that the Airports Authority is fulfilling the guidelines that the Ministry would have wanted it.
There's a good working relationship.
Thank you very much. To the Airports Authority, the authority on your submission would have noted that you would have developed and implemented procedures to ensure compliance with the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act 2015 as amended. Can you advise whether the Airports Authority at this point is now fully compliant with that act?
I could say that we are fully compliant with the OPR provisions and the public procurement legislation. The latest thing we have done is we developed our own special guidelines, and we are now in the process of ensuring that it received the necessary approvals. Now, we as the entity responsible for the two aerodromes recognize the importance of us being acting in accordance with that piece of legislation, and we recognize that it would have had some challenges. So we started early. Even before the act was proclaimed, we in fact had put in place the requirements that was indicated in the legislation. So when the legislation was fully proclaimed, we felt that we were in fact ready in terms of meeting the requirements, and we have been doing that since 2023. Since it was.
So just for my clarification, so that you would have been preparing in anticipation of the legislation.
And the full proclamation. Yeah.
Having had the proclamation and so on already taking place, you are now convinced. Well, you said you were working on special handbook and guidelines from the Office of the Procurement Regulation.
Yes.
That would have been prepared by you all for
approval
by
by
your special circumstances.
Yes.
What is the status of that? Has it been approved?
We're at the stage where, in fact, the board is, in fact, making a final review of it before it is submitted to the Office of the Procurement Regulator for approval, final approval.
But your operations thus far, over the period since the legislation, would have been guided by
the act itself.
The act itself.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My colleague has a question. Have you had any challenges in terms of implementing the act itself?
Significant challenges. We have had significant challenges related to a number of issues. One of the major issues, of course, is the fact that the pre-qualification procedure, first the registration procedure and the pre-qualification procedure was not as user-friendly as we would like. And of course, this is feedback from the vendors and the suppliers. One of the other things that we have, of course, is because we are an entity which is procuring internationally. We had a challenge of having some of our international vendors first register to be registered and also to be pre-qualified. And we had to, in fact, work on that because some of the native of our specialty type equipment are all imported. All right, and that is a challenge that we are still facing and a challenge that we are working on. What we attempted to do, and perhaps which assisted us, is that we immersed ourselves in the legislation early o'clock, and we kind of knew these things were going to come up. But we, as at the Airports Authority, have attempted to work with the vendors, And here we're talking about not necessarily in terms of procurement, which requires public procurement. We're talking about procurement where, in fact, there might be situations where it's only one or two vendors internationally who is, in fact, providing these kind of services. Let me give you a good example. I'll give an example. Boeing would not, in fact, come to pre-qualify in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is a challenge that, in fact, not only the Airports Authority, but some of the other providers of aviation services would have. All right, so we have had to work around these things, and this is why our special guidelines are very important now in terms of providing and getting the approval for the special guidelines, particularly so for the procurement of specialty equipment and equipment that is of an international nature.
Do you have a timeline for when you think the guidelines will be approved?
Well, our board, it's before, just before the board, a subcommittee of the board is in fact looking at it right now for the January sitting of the board, and then it goes to the regulator for approval.
So we're still a few months away.
Yeah.
Have we then had a situation where we've had to pause on procurement in anticipation of this special handbook and guidelines being approved? Have we had to pause acquisition of services or equipment,
I wouldn't say we have had to
etc.?
pause. What we have had to do is that we have had to act in strict compliance with the OPR. It has caused a challenge in some of the procurement of some of the international equipment, but it has. What we have done, and perhaps maybe it was a good thing that before the legislation was in fact proclaimed, we would have ensured that there was sufficient supplies in some of these equipment because we anticipated that that was going to be one of the challenges. But of course, it's running down now, so we definitely will have to get these special guidelines approved in a short space of time.
All right. I think the question I'm obviously trying to get to is whether or not the fact that you don't have the guidelines at this point, and we have the procurement legislation that you are strictly adhering to, whether or not the inability to procure would have affected your ability to perform your responsibility.
It has affected us in some ways.
Has it affected you in terms of provision of service? Has it affected you in terms of supplies, in terms of repairs, etc., etc.?
We have what we have done, Chairman, is that we have adjusted. I want to say that we have adjusted effectively.
Would you be in a position to say whether it has in fact affected the health and safety, any sort of aspects of the health and safety of workers, your vendors, no?
We take
Thank
health
you
and
very
safety. I mean, the basis of our mandate is to provide safe and secure services at the airport. We take that very seriously.
Thank you. I want to move on to another question. In the submission, the Airports Authority advised us that the cost of developing your strategic plan for 2014 to 2017 and for 2018 to 2022 was approximately $500,000 TT. Can you break that down? Tell us what was the cost of the first strategic plan for 2014-2017 and the second 2018-2022. Can you tell us what was the cost of each individual component? I know together they cost $500,000. I want to figure out if you have that data.
I do have that right now, but I don't have to provide that.
Can you advise who were the providers of that service, the preparation of your strat plan?
Sorry, I apologize. Yeah. The facilitator was for the 2018 to 2022 would have been a regional company. It would have been Aubrey Armstrong and Associates. I think that was the company that would have provided the service. I can't recall before that. Often.
And would you be familiar with how they would have been sourced?
Yeah, it would have been done by way of our tender procedure in terms of an international tender.
So that's up to 2022. We are now in 2024.
Yes.
would you have now a current strat plan that you're working on the basis of?
Okay, we are
2023 into 2024, 25.
we have, what we did is that we rolled over the 2018 to 2022, given the fact that at the end of that period was COVID. So a lot of the goals and objectives were not achieved during that period. So we rolled it over into 2023. Right now we're working on actually in a 2024 to 2029 plan. What we have done is we have done internal work in terms of preparing. And we are at the stage where we have done sufficient work to now get a facilitator, an international facilitator, given we're talking about the aviation environment, to assist us in terms of finalizing that plan.
So you have had substantial, I understand that because of COVID you would have had some substantial restrictions in achieving your guidelines, your targets, for that period. You said you would have rolled it over into the 2023 and forward period.
Yeah.
Can you advise generally, or even specifically if you have, what exactly, I want to find out what was your level of achievement and in which areas, and whether, I'm going back to whether or not that would have compromised your ability to perform your responsibility. So, just for clarification, you said that several of your targets were not met up to the 2018 as a result of COVID, etc.
Right.
And you would have rolled over that 2018 to 2022. You would have rolled over.
Right, just for your period. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you would have rolled over your targets into that period, 2023 and forward. I was trying to get an idea of what exactly was not achieved and then rolled over 2023 to 2024.
Could I provide that to the committee? Because what it is, I would like to go in more details with respect to the actual strategic plan rather than talking off the cuff with respect to something like that. Right? So could I share that with the committee members?
Sure,
Chairman?
sure. We'd appreciate that very much. I have one more question that I want to raise with you before we go into my other colleagues, and that's specifically with regards to risk management. The Airports Authority, in its submission to us, advised that cybersecurity is crucial. I'm quoting your response. Cybersecurity is crucial. It is standard practice to implement strong security features, including encryption, access limits, and frequent audits. The important takeaway from this is the necessity of ongoing caution. Cyber risks are always changing, and therefore the authority needs to keep up with the newest security reinforcements and take lessons from previous hacks, end quote. I think given our recent history in Trinidad and Tobago, that is a critical statement, and clearly it would be an issue for all of us as legislators and as persons involved in the industry yourselves. Can you advise whether the authority has experienced any hacks or any cybersecurity issues during your period of coverage?
We have not.
Thank you very much. I think that's a fabulous, concept for me to hear, at least in current form. But I think my colleague had a question she wants us to raise, I assume, based on this.
Well, that was a good question, Chairman. But I've listened that you probably seem to have your procurement function well in hand based on the what you would have said. But in looking at the document you would have submitted, I can't remember the title of the document, but anyway, as at 30th September 2023, you have several vacancies, significant vacancies, the corporate secretary being one. You have a function called the airport equipment specialist, which is probably a specialist kind of function, and you have 7. Apron control officer. I don't know how these impact on your safety and even your this kind of oversight from the global agency, well, the American agency, FAA as it were, aviation screener, 34, CCTV operators, 40, duty managers, 4, facilities technicians, 8, maintenance assistant, 8, system up, and some others, the list. But, these numbers jump out that if you need 34 aviation screeners, how does that impact your certification with the FAA, as it were?
let me give an explanation of what happened in terms of the vacancies. Between coming out of 2019, the intention was to focus in terms of ensuring that our HR and vacancies were in fact addressed. Of course, COVID stepped in. Between March 2020 and July 2021, no way we were going to focus in terms of filling any vacancies because the border was essentially closed. We came back into operation in 2022 and in 2023, and we had to start to focus on rebuilding, seeing what is happening in terms of passenger movement and passenger numbers before we did anything. So the plan really is for 2024 to deal with the question of filling these vacancies, to focus on our HR, to focus on the issue of talent management, because what has been happening in terms of the aviation industry is that your skilled, trained people, they are very mobile, let's put it like that. And we have had situations where, in fact, even with my challenges with the vacancies, where I would have lost some of the critical manpower to agencies throughout the Caribbean. One of my deputy general manager went into as the general manager in terms of the BVI, and I had a number of my other significant HR talent move into other airports in the Caribbean.
With a corporate secretary, we have a lot of.
We have an acting corporate secretary right now, and we in the process of filling that. We have final interviews on the 18th of January with respect to that position. Right? So the point I'm making is that 2024, first quarter of 2024, it's the focus on the question of filling those vacancies. It didn't, from a practical point of view, the Airports Authority and one of the points I need to make, during the COVID situation, the Airports Authority would have faced the situation where we had to get direct financing from the government. For 30 years, that never happened. We got direct financing from the government in terms of meeting the recurrent expenditure for that period. All right. So the plan was, let's see what is happening after COVID. Let's see what is happening in terms of rebuilding. Let's now look at the question of the vacancies. Let's look at the question of other resources we require to make sure we meet this. We continue to meet our objectives of providing the safe and secure aviation services.
But General Manager,
yes,
travel is back, basically, if you have to look at what is going on internationally.
Yes. Yeah.
And what the chairman has asked me to ask, what has been the length of time these vacancies has been on the book? Now, it's a lot of vacancies, so maybe you could send that back in writing.
I'll
give
do
me
that.
a list of vacancies.
I'll send it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. And I'll also send where we are right now in terms of filling them and what we're doing in terms of filling them.
Okay. In looking at your strategic plan,
yes,
you have you talk about your throughput because that is part of your profit centers.
Yes.
All right, or your revenue centers, as it were, in terms of the amount of people passing through your facility. And notwithstanding, you're getting best airport in the Caribbean, and I had a little something to do with that. So the point I'm making is that, notwithstanding that, based on the length of time we have been in our proud history in aviation, I think when we look at maybe at 2.9 million, is it 2.9 million in terms of the
2.8 million?
2.8 million.
Yeah.
Since 2001, the opening of the new airport, that is, well, what is now old airport, or I don't know what in terms of aging, what it means. But I always compare to, and this is not cheesy or anything. I mean, I look at infrastructure. We look at infrastructure all the time. If you're into infrastructure, what is happening in Dubai? Who came after us? Where Emirates was just a little thing when BWIA at the time, really, or Legacy Airline, was up and running. So where Dubai is in terms of arrivals, I think it's about 88 million passengers. I could be wrong with that number. And Singapore, Changi Airport is around 60-something million or thereabouts. You're probably more current with it. And why can't we get up the numbers? What is keeping us back? Because, you see, I mean, I love my Caribbean and everything, but comparing us with the rest of the Caribbean, really, I don't think, given where we are, our position, and we always talk about this hub and spoke into Latin America, why can't we get it going? Because we have an airline, the proud history of the airline, etc. Yes, we probably need more equipment, and you are dependent on many other factors, whether agencies like tourism, CAL, etc., etc.? What is keeping us back from moving forward?
That's a real complex question, but let me hazard a response. Developing the traffic into Piaco and A&R Robinson, it's a function of a number of things, as you said. A crucial part is one of the question of air services development, which the Airports Authority is playing a crucial role with some of the stakeholder agencies to try to assist in getting that up. In fact, in the past we'd have played some pivotal roles in some of the airlines that you're seeing now coming in within recent time, KLM example. But with the greatest respect, I think the comparisons with the Shanghai and the Dubai, it's different. I agree with you from a perspective of vision that that's where we want to get to at some point in time, right? But I think we have to, in fact, creep before we could, in fact, walk and run. And some of the things that we need to put in place in terms of the whole environment, we need to work on that. Work on the question of the agencies working together. Airports Authority, just one of the agencies in the COG that is required to work together with the tourism agencies, the other agencies that will assist in terms of development to get this thing going. And while in terms of our vision and statement for the Airports Authority, we vision to look at beyond the region, right? But we are also realistic of where we are right now. But you're right. I think we have reached a point, given the history of aviation in Trinidad and Tobago, that we should be looking at visioning beyond the region. And to do that, we need to get the synergies of everybody working together.
Managing Director, sorry, I just have two other questions briefly. You know how cold Europe is now? It's in the freeze, you understand? And we have a lot of competing destinations. I'm sure you all would have gone to the world travel market, so they all have a product, etc. And somehow this beautiful project we have, particularly my island home, and my friend from Tobago East will agree with me, that we have the best product in the world. Maybe not here, but in Tobago, certainly. And for the life of me, I really don't understand, why we are not kind of, marketing is a big part of it, quite frankly. If people don't know, if you build a better mousetrap and nobody knows, you really have to tell the world. But in looking at your SWOT, the weaknesses, you have aging infrastructure.
Right.
That roof is still giving you the trouble. It still has a leak.
The skyline, we have to work on that. But the other parts, we have done some work, and we intend to do some more work on the roof this year. But the skyline itself has been a challenge, and we need to fix that.
All right. So, all right. Well, you know your weaknesses, and maybe somebody could just speak to what you all are going to do about that. I also looked at your receivables.
Right.
You have significant receivables. I don't know if I could find it again. The Chairman, I'm an accountant on paper, but you probably are practicing one. I saw your receivables. What are you doing about that in terms of these? Because you don't have a lot of airlines. The last time I checked, I think they had said 10. I don't know if it's 10. It's still
It's around that, yeah.
And if it is, you can't manage 10. Can you confirm what the receivables are this time?
Chairman, member, when you talk about the receivables, you're looking at for the period 2018 to 2019, or you're looking at current? You want to talk about current receivables?
Well, we could look at current, but you have quite, because you have, what I'm seeing here is going back from 2013, coming forward. So I don't know how successful you are in liquidating your receivables, actually.
Okay. Well, that's why I want to find out, because there's a significant change between what happened between 2018 and 2019.
You have a lot of write-offs for impairment and that kind of thing. Right?
Yeah. What I'll ask the financial controller to talk about the receivables position, but what I could say is that the position now, it's not what was between 2013 to 2019 in terms of receivables.
So I have one last question for now. So it's much better. It is enhanced. Better. So we'll find out. Yeah. Do you have spaces up at the airport for rent, or everything is taken right now?
No, we have spaces. We have spaces that we have very recently put out an RFP for potential proposals with respect to both Piaco and ANA.
Is that new space, or people have moved out?
Some moved out, some new spaces.
Why are they moving out? They're not the business, is it?
We had COVID had damaged a lot of some of the businesses, and some people moved out as a consequence of that, and we are filling those spaces.
All right, I'll stop for now, Chair.
All right, I just want to piggyback off a question that my colleague asked with regards to the receivables. She also mentioned, because I also saw it in your submissions, that there were substantial amounts of write-offs. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we are in a better position currently may have been as a result of the write-offs of some of these receivables. So your financial controller was going to brief us as to what is the state of play then and compared to now. But I also want him to be very specific in terms of giving us information with regards to these write-offs. I'm curious as to find out the value, the whom. I'm curious as to find out how we would have pursued those debts before it became critical to write them off, and whether those players are still in play, having benefited from a write-off of a debt. Those are the kind of questions I would like to have your financial controller respond to.
Okay, before she responds, I could lay the ground by telling you the major write-off would have been Caribbean Airlines, and the financial controller will provide details.
With respect to the write-off, the Cabinet approved a write-off for Caribbean Airlines of $205 million, which would have represented debt to us, well, the Airports Authority, from 2007 to 2019. That was basically for their rent of their hangar space and their head office, $205 million. And currently our debt is approximately $72 million, and of that $72 million, 50% of it is collectible from Caribbean Airlines. Our debtor days is currently 72 days, and our relationship with CAL has severely improved over the past couple of months in terms of their debt repayment, and we expect that our $72 million in debt will be collected.
Both the general manager and yourself has indicated that CAL is your largest debt. I think I read somewhere where it was about 30% of the value of your debt. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. But that leaves other debtors. My question remains to who are these other debtors, whether they are still in place. So we have accepted that CAL has received a write-off of $205 million, you said? Not too sure what period that is for, so maybe if you could provide that information too, because it seems that having written off $205 million, we still have $72 million in debt from CAL, correct? Or $50 million, was that correct?
Caribbean Airlines is 50% of our $72 million, so they are a little over $35 million in debt to us. And that debt is, Caribbean Airlines debt is approximately 60 days outstanding, because their payment terms and their relations with us has improved drastically since the write-off. That write-off of $205 million represented rents due for their head office and their hangar space and other spaces that they rent from us from 2007 to 2019.
All right, so just, again, I want to state it a little bit differently. From 2007 to 2019, we had an accumulated debt of $205 million that was written off. And
Correct.
Therefore, from 2019 to current,
yes,
we have a debt of $30-odd million.
$35 million.
How long, so that was across the period, $30 million in debt across the period, 2019 to current?
No, that $30 million is only 60 days outstanding.
Okay, got it. So we have a rolling,
yes.
a rolling institution.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. I think my colleague here wanted to raise a question based on something Mr. Newton had said earlier. So before we get into more detail, let's go back to that question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the issue of cyber security. Right. And before I ask one question, I'm going to read something that I pulled up online, right? It's from Cybersecurity for Airports, Safeguarding Against Today's Threats. Airports need to implement a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy that includes risk assessment, access control, network security, endpoint security, and incident response planning. comprehensive information security management system to identify and mitigate potential risks, as well as measures to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information is crucial, right? You said to date we haven't had any threats, and I'm happy, knock wood, we mightn't have any. But what measures are you putting in place to ensure that if a threat comes up, that we are able to respond and respond well? What is your strategy? What measures have you taken thus far? Have you engaged any experts in the field? Tell me about it, please, because this is very important.
Thank you, Chairman Member. I agree that this is very important. One of the things I want to say is that, and I would like my head of security to provide some more details. But one of the things I want to say about cybersecurity is that while it is now very topical with respect to cybersecurity, this is something that the Airports Authority have always been planning for. The annex, one of the annexes of our that we are required to follow under the International Civil Aviation Organization, Annex 17, within recent time has been specifically amended, whereby airports are required to put in place an extensive framework with respect to cybersecurity. We recently were audited, the whole area, not only the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, but civil aviation and the oversight was recently audited by ICAO with respect to these annexes. One of the annexes they would have looked at is the question of Annex 17 and the question of our cybersecurity apparatus that we have in place. So this is something that we take very seriously, and I would like Colonel Griffith, who is in charge of security, to provide just a little bit more detail for you in terms of what we're doing in terms of cybersecurity.
Thank you, General Manager, and thank you very much for the question, ma'am. So, arising out of the recent amendment to Annex 17, and as the General Manager was indicating, it specifically directs us to take steps pertinent to the protection of all our information technology assets and all the information associated with the conduct of civil aviation. And arising out of that amendment, what we did internally was found and establish a cybersecurity governance committee. All right, my colleague who is seated next to me is actually the head of that governance committee. It's multidisciplinary. It incorporates quite naturally resources from information technology, security, maintenance, and other branches of the organization. I want to say, concomitant to that, that even before we started facing the kinds of cyber threats that have been reflected in the media recently, the authority had a very proactive approach to guarding and protecting its data by the use of what might generally be referred to as the conventional cybersecurity measures that you'd find in most organizations. What the recent amendment has done, it has reoriented our outlook completely in terms of specific measures for the protection of data and the protection of information technology resources and so on. And we're currently in the process of putting together a very, very coherent plan that we're currently rolling out. I'd ask Mr. Barr to talk specifically. Oh, sure.
You said there were recent amendments, right? Now, would that mean that you will have to inject additional resources specifically for cybersecurity, and do you have the resources available?
That is one of the things that the governance committee is looking at. We're also looking at the engagement of expertise from overseas. We've had online meetings with cybersecurity experts and experts in the environment of aviation security who understand the environment and understand the risk profile and so on, above and beyond what you might be inclined to find in existing organizations. So the answer to your question is yes, we are very, very aggressively rolling out that cybersecurity plan at the moment.
And I'm happy to hear that, and I want to commend the authority. But going back to another issue, and it's procurement. You said that you're having discussions with online and whatever, so I'm assuming that most of the expertise we may have to procure externally. Given the challenges, and you said you're preparing your guidelines, do you foresee any challenges, and what strategies do you intend to implement to mitigate those challenges?
One of the things that we ensured, even while we are looking and developing on the guidelines, we also reached out to those entities that are important to us in terms of our mission critical, to ensure that they register and that they are pre-qualified for lines of business. We did that. Right, we did that.
Thank you. Before I go on to my colleague again, I want to go back to a question I had asked, which I realized that I haven't got any benefit of the response yet. The 50%, so I'm going back to the debt. So, ma'am, Mrs. Wallace-Shanklin, Financial Controller, back to you. 50% of the debt outstanding is in the hands of CAL. But, well, two questions. Did we have any other write-offs? And who are the other 50%? The reason I'm querying about the other write-offs is that CAL, I understand, is a national airline, and we are dealing with them. We have to deal with them. But I'm curious as to find out if there are other outstanding persons who would have benefited from a write-off that we are still doing business with. So, first question, has there been any other write-off except for CAL, outside of CAL? Have there been any other write-off of debts by Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago?
Before the financial control, I just want to clarify, Airports Authority of Trinidad, we don't write off debts at all. It's the Ministry of Works and the Ministry who, in fact, would write off. All right? Camilla, if she has the information, will provide the details. But it's based upon my understanding, I don't know of any entity that would receive the write-off debts that are, in fact, currently operating at the Airports Authority. And I think Camilla has to clarify that.
During the period under question, Cabinet would have also approved a write-off back in 2017 or 18 of 30 million, and that 30 million, of it, approximately 15 million or 16 million would have related to BWA 1995 Limited. These are debts older, they would have been older than the year 2000. When BWA would have changed, they would have had changed, many times over the period. So those would have been very old debts. And then we would have had other debts for other airlines that would have went bankrupt, like Ghana Airways, Air Caribbean, and also Liat. Liat had a old debt as well. So debt prior, debt prior to the year 2000, all of that was written off, of course, with the approval of Cabinet in 2017 and 18 to try to clean up the receivables of those very old airlines and those very old debts. That was in 2018. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Newton, just for information, I'm aware that the ministry is the one who approves the write-off, but on the documents and the financial statements, it's the Airports Authority that has the write-off, which is why my question was directed to you rather than to the ministry.
Thank you, Chairman.
I want to turn over now to my colleague, who will ask some more questions on some other pressing issues before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is directed towards the General Manager, Mr. Newton. You mentioned, sir, that the airport was adjudged the best in the Caribbean and elsewhere, yes? I mean, one is always happy to hear those things. You also mentioned that you saw the need for the whole environment to work together. Because when people talk about the airport experience, they talk about several facets. Have you been meeting with the various entities which comprise that space that you govern, that you in fact operate? And are they responding to you as they should? Is there any difficulties that you discern in any particular area? I came into the airport 2 Fridays ago,
And I wondered, has there been a bomb scare? Because I saw something, I travel very regularly, and I saw something which was very strange. From leaving the plane, making a quick stop, and coming to immigration, the place was empty. That American Airlines flight was filled to capacity. So, of course, I asked the question, what happened? Where is everybody? I'm not seeing the long lines. There was a fresh wind blowing so that everybody was attended to and out of that airport space in no time at all. And I heard that new administration. So there are things that can be done. I mean, that gave me such a great feeling to know that people are not fretting and quarreling and standing up in that line, because we have decided that it is really a good idea to fill all those booths with officers. So is that something that we expect will be continued? Is it going to, we're going to see that fresh wind that was blowing into customs and all the other, everything seemed to be very efficient. And I mean, that was the 29th, and not the 29th, the 5th of January. So is it that something is happening there, or there's a flux, as we call it?
Before you answer, sir, let me draw a different example. So on the 5th of January, we had a very fresh wind blowing. On the week before that, around the 20th thereabouts, we had a different wind blowing, whereby I am aware because I was waiting for a relative, and the flight landed, and it took about an hour and a half between, in fact, I think it was more than that, between landing and exiting the airport authority. And there were only 2 flights that had landed around the same time. So in your response, I want you to look at both sides of this thing. That there would have been some difficult times when you would have had persons awaiting customs and immigration officers, and there's a lot on social media with regards to that. And in this instance, my colleague here was very fortunate, I think. But maybe it may have been that my experience was the unfortunate one and hers was the fortunate one, or maybe it may have been just an odd situation that occurred during my time.
Just if I can,
sure.
What day did you say?
I think it was the 20th, I can't remember the exact date now, I think it was the 20th of December.
Because they told me around since Christmas it started, eh? So, I'll leave it to Mr. Newton.
Perhaps, unfortunately, I could say that both responses are quite valid. There has been some degree of inconsistency in terms of what is happening in terms of facilitation of passengers utilizing some of our agencies, which we are not directly responsible for as the Airports Authority, but of which we partner with the Customs and Immigration and the Border Control. There has been inconsistency, which our surveys and our quality control programs has picked up. We have tried to work with both agencies utilizing more moral suasion than anything else, because remember what we're doing is that we're existing in that framework where you have various pieces of legislation. You have the Customs Act, you have the Immigration Act, and then you have the Airports Authorities Act working together. So it has been a situation where we have been trying to use moral suasion and try to assist even with respect to personnel. And sometimes we are told, none of your business. But the fact is that is a challenge for us that we as the providers of the key service in the airport have a consistent problem with. The inconsistency in terms of what happens at the border control, both immigration and customs. And you're right, Chairman, for a time in January, I couldn't sleep because, of course, it's the Airports Authority, so I'll get calls at 12, 1 o'clock in the night that what is happening in the lines in customs? And I will say, well, it's really kind of beyond my remit to, in fact, actively assist with that problem. So I agree, and it's a challenge that we as a nation have to find a solution to. We are talking about, and I agree with the member, that we're looking to make sure that we are beyond Latin America. But that is a significant bugbear for the development of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of our passenger movement, the inconsistency in terms of those agencies.
You spoke about the strategic plan and about $500,000 and so on, but you also, for the cost, 500,000,
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right. But you also said that in your report that a lot of the work has, started and in-house. So do you anticipate there'll be much better in terms of price this time? And do you anticipate that perhaps you could look more inside than outside in terms of procuring because we have very talented people here, and even if they're not involved specifically in airport activity, research is always available. And a lot of people in the Caribbean cooperate in a number of ways. You talk to people, in Bahamas and other, and I find people very willing to cooperate. I don't have a problem with that. So I hope that you'll explore more getting local people to deal with that. I'm sure you can. Tell me if you can't.
Yes, we can. One of the things we did is that we, by doing a lot of the work in-house already, the pre-work, we anticipate that the cost would not be that kind of cost in the past. Because in the past, what we did is that they brought a facilitator and took the whole process. We learned. And we have the technical expertise in terms of the managerial and the professional staff who could in fact craft the necessary work in terms of a strategic plan. We'll have just the facilitator to assist us in terms of the review, in terms of the stakeholder engagement, in terms of the peer review. So we have done a lot of the work already. All right. So we don't anticipate it will be that cost. And in doing that, we will be looking for local content.
I am comforted, sir.
If I may to, again, piggyback off what my colleague has raised and what you have indicated. What you've said basically is that you're going to be doing a lot more in-house work in 2024 and so on going forward. I know you're speaking specifically about the strat plan. However, I want to go backwards to an issue we raised earlier, which is the staffing. So you are doing much more work with much less staff. That's amazing. And you are generating a profit with much less staff. My question to you, sir, is when was the last human resource audit done, which will determine whether or not the staffing that we saw here, which was listed under areas prioritized for 2024 and 2023, when was your last staff audit that tells you, based on your strat plan, etc., that these are the staff members that you specifically need to get? Given what you just said, you have expanded your input, your current staff is doing so well, and you're generating an operating profit.
One of the things that the current board has done is that they have insisted that we review the whole question of our manpower plan and the question of the audit, right? And that's one of the reasons that we didn't rush in 2023 to fill vacancies, right? And that is being done now. What the focus is to ensure that those mission-critical positions are in fact filled. At the same time, we have also benchmarked with what other airports have done. Other airports have been using a combination of goods and services, meaning contracting out some of the services, and at the same time also utilizing in-house employed personnel. So we have been looking at all of that as in terms of developing our strategic plan before we go and fill the vacancies that we would have listed here. We're reviewing, in other words, what you're talking about in terms of the audit, manpower audit, that is in fact taking place. In fact, I have to report to the Finance and Finances HR subcommittee in January with respect to the question of the work that we would have done in terms of the manpower plan audit.
With regards to the HR, is it? All right, so still staying with HR, how does one get a job at the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago?
apologies again. Yeah. Positions are advertised, and we also have prospective candidates who are interested in the authority will, in fact, submit applications, and depending on when vacancies arise in particular situation, we look to see whether or not they are applicable and the qualifications.
So there are two separate streams.
Yes.
You're describing a position being advertised, and separately somebody offering themselves.
Yes, and they are also brought into the engagement process.
So it's not a standard. Oh, so
yes.
I'm getting to, if a position is available, it is advertised nationally on the newspapers, on its website, etc.
Yes.
Correct? I just checked, literally just checked, on your website under vacancies.
Yes.
And there's none.
Yes.
But I have a report from you all saying that the various areas prioritized.
Yes.
Let me ask the question differently. What is the best operating staff complement for the Airports Authority for it to be fully optimal?
Why I would answer that question is because of the fact that right now we're in the process in terms of the manpower plan reviewing the actual numbers and complements. I could give you the old figures that was a part of the so-called establishment, but we are reviewing that right now.
I am a little concerned because this is the actual basis on which the efficiency of your operations is developed, the existence of your human resource potential, etc.
Agree.
And you are at this point not able to tell the committee that for optimum performance you need 600 employees, of which you have 500. And I'm using that phrase and those numbers for a specific reason, because you advised that for 2023-2024 you needed 124 more persons,
yes,
which you did not have. So clearly, as at 2023, in fact, as at December 2023, when you made your submissions to us, you had a clear idea of the number of staff members and specifics as to what positions you wanted to fill in 2024. So telling me now that you're not sure and you're still reworking the human resource audit, you knew at point when you wrote to the committee that you had this much and you needed this much, even up to the specifics. Now I understand if you are amending it as you go along, but tell us what was, you understand what I'm asking?
Understand.
What are the figures?
I understand, and it's a fair question. I would have to hold in terms of what I would have provided to the committee as the complement that we require at that point in time. That is before, of course, the exercise that was brought on by the HR subcommittee in terms of reviewing the entire manpower.
Okay, so easier.
Yeah.
So so we have 124, which you at least at the end of the year, last month, a couple of days ago, you said you need 124 more.
Yes.
What is the existing staff complement?
Right now, in terms of, we have 700, let me get the exact figure, because I make sure I brought that one out. $768.
So you have 768,
yes,
and you think that you would need at least 124, which will be finalized when you're finished with your assessment.
When do you think you'll be finished?
When do you think you'll be finished? I'm asking for a specific reason. I'm very concerned that you are not functioning at your best because you don't have the staff required, and that time is passing. And more time is passing. This was 2023-24, which is where we are now.
Right.
But more time is passing before we even begin the process of advertising, etc., 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 etc. And the operation then is in a state of transition. So what this tells me is that the Airports Authority has been in operation for quite a while. You've been at the helm for quite a while as well. I am just looking at the status with regards to staffing.
Right.
The procurement parts of it, equipment, etc. You said that you all are working on it based on the procurement legislation and so on. But I'm looking at the importance of staffing, and this is 124 more persons out within a framework of an existing 700 plus. It's a large number. It's a big chunk of persons that you say you need to move the Airports Authority forward. I'm just looking to push you in the direction of getting that resolved as fast as possible. I want to ask a different question. So we're assuming that very soon we'll see advertisements for vacancies at the Airports Authority. How does one get promoted within the Airports Authority? How does one go, for example, from the position of an admin assistant to admin assistant manager? How does one go from one position to a general manager's position? How is that done? Is that done in-house, or is that done in collaboration with the ministry or other entities? Are these positions advertised, or do we simply pick from the internal crowd?
Positions are advertised. It's a combination of positions being advertised, positions, internal mobility in terms of performance of employees in various, in terms of our succession plan. So it's the traditional HR methodology in terms of talent management and employees moving in terms of the organization.
So when you are seeking to fill a vacancy, do you advertise internally?
You have a combination of internal advertisements taking place. Yes, and depending on the level, it might be a situation based upon how the employees would have performed and a vacancy, and that's a normal situation in any organization.
So how do you then? So I'm building on it.
Right.
How do you get to determine the creation of a position?
Okay.
So we have established positions, several of which you've identified here. We have established positions. How do you create a new position? What's the process? Guide me, walk me through that process.
No, that's a different thing. Creation of a new position, it has to go at the level of the HR subcommittee, the board, and those kind of things.
So, okay. So if we are creating a position of a manager that does not exist or did not exist last year, and we are creating just for the example, or did not exist 3 years ago, and we're creating a position of a manager, you have a human resource entity within Airports Authority that develops the plan and so on going forward?
Yes, a human resource.
So the creation of positions, and that's the point I want to make, the creation of positions is based on the strat plan. And the direction that you want the strat plan to go. And in that strat plan, you will have your organizational chart, etc., and those positions are all there. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And those positions are determined by the assessment of your human resource.
The assessment of the needs of the organization was by the human resource subcommittee and the human resource department. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I don't know if my colleagues have any other questions. Ma'am? Yes, you do.
Other income revenue, yes? Now, could you elaborate on security passes and security awareness training?
Fees are charged for security awareness training. All entities that are required to operate on the airport are required to engage in a security awareness training program that is conducted by our security department and our aviation training department, and they would have to pay. They will have to pay for that service. So that is the security awareness training.
How long? How much?
The training is. I don't have the. Camilla. I don't know if my financial controller has the details offhand. Yeah, I don't know if my financial controller has the details offhand. Camilla.
The security awareness training is usually 1 day, and the fee is $287 per person.
And the security passes, are there classes of passes with different fees, or?
Yes, there are different types of passes, and there are different fees. Colonel Griffith could probably assist.
So we use a system of grading passes in accordance with access control. So you'd have a pass that would allow you to access a particular area, but not beyond that area, and so on, in addition to passes that would allow universal access to the airport. The passes are generic. They tend to utilize the same material, the same amount of labor and processing and so on. So in terms of the actual cost per tag or per pass. Right now, it comes in at about maybe a little in excess of $200 for a permanent pass and $100 for a temporary pass.
People who operate within the environment.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
I see. Okay. You mentioned benchmarking using other airports. Now, I must say, I mean, although we win best airport and all of that, I don't think that we can claim to have the best looking airport in the Caribbean. I can tell you. So, what do you use as benchmarking for your, classification? And tell me, perhaps, are there any plans to make our airport look more beautiful? I mean, I am not proud of how it looks.
First, in terms of the Skytrack Award, Skytrax has a number of touch points or categories that they use in terms, there are about 44, that are used in terms of assessing the airport. Right? Of course, aesthetics is one of them, but there are a number of other things. Some of them are not directly under the control. Some of them are not directly under the control of the Airports Authority. But in the WASH, the perspective is that, in fact, and this is done by how Skytrack works in terms of their quality benchmarking, is that it's travelers and travelers who participate in, and it's anonymous travelers, so we don't know exactly how it is done. But there are 44 categories that are used in terms of assessing, and aesthetics is only one of them. And in terms of what we intend to do in terms of improving the aesthetics at both PIACO and ANR. Of course, ANR is a new airport, is in fact being new terminal facilities is in fact being developed right now. At PIACO, we intend to in fact use a combination of some technology, using some of the modern AI facilities and stuff like that to try to improve the aesthetics. We intend to also try to improve the question of the sense of place of the organization, and here we get in the assistance of some of the agencies, such as the tourism agencies and that kind of thing. So some effort will be done in 2024. You'll see some changes in terms of what you see at the main airport in terms of PIACO International. Right? We're not going to focus too much in terms of the aesthetics, in terms of A&R Robinson, given the work that has been done in terms of developing the new terminal. All right, but I mean that's in a nutshell. And what I could do, what I like to do is, Chairman, is I'll provide some written response in terms of some of the things that we intend to do in terms of making sure the places and the aesthetics is in terms of improved.
What other airports the authority uses as references benchmarking?
We certainly, let me tell you, in terms of with the greatest respect, we don't benchmark with Caribbean airports. We benchmark with airports in Latin America. Mm-hmm. We benchmark with airports in the United States. Mm-hmm. in terms of development of our
Name just one for me now, just one.
In Latin America, generally. We benchmark, we look at Tucumán, we look at Costa Rica's main airport, we look at the airports in Buenos Aires, we look at some of the the smaller airports in the United States rather than the large ones, right, in terms of what they're doing, in terms of what we would like to achieve.
I expect to see you in the Bahamas.
Yeah, we have been to Linden Pindling. Of course, we are still beating Linden Pindling with all you're saying in terms of the surveys.
If I may to follow up on my colleague's question, I'm glad you mentioned Costa Rica.
Yes.
Because one of the best examples of advertising local content has actually been that airport at Costa Rica.
You're correct.
Can you advise what kind of arrangements you've had with local artists to ensure that their products, which are products of Trinidad and Tobago, in many cases which also reflect the beauty of our island. What products, outside of the fixed screens, the artwork that says welcome to Trinidad and Tobago and so on, what activities have you all taken to encourage local artists to exhibit, for example, at the airport, or to have some more of that local content so that we could promote culture while we promote the airport?
What I could say is that we have a plan in 2024, to have our local artists exhibit their works in the Piarco International Airport. That plan is well developed, and it should be rolled out in the first quarter of 2020.
Okay, so I'm an economist and finance person by definition.
Yes.
But as a parliamentarian, our first quarters may be different. First quarter, is it first quarter calendar or first quarter financial?
We use calendar. We use calendar in terms of first quarter. The Airports Authority has a perspective right now where our financial year is still calendar year. My
reason for asking is I consider myself a culture aficionado. Well, I love our culture,
right,
and I actually want to see more of it, right. Not just the advertisement, but more of the actual artists' presence in India. I know my colleague had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me. A follow-up question based on what you just said. The exhibition, fine, but when you go up to purchase things to take away, usually it's something stamped with a Trinidad and Tobago, something when you turn it over, made in China. What are you doing to partner with Export TT Ministry of Community Development? Because I know they have programs, training programs, Ministry of Tourism, to ensure that our local artisans are prominently featured in our duty-free shops, so that when somebody passes through and they pick up something, like if I pick up a mug, I know it was crafted by somebody in Santa Cruz. If I pick up a bag and I turn it over, I would see probably TT on it, because it's not a bag, generic bag from China, it's just painted Trinidad and Tobago. What are you doing because in the opening statement, Mr. Deputy Chairman, I wrote down some of his keywords. Catalyst for trade and investment and tourism and multi-purpose commercial center. I wrote those down because they jumped out. But what are you doing to truly help to build the local tourism industry in Trinidad and Tobago, to build our artisans, to build our craftsmen and women who are there with their talent and the ability and looking for ways to monetize it? Could you please expand and explain?
We would have had in 2022, we got some of an agency of the artisans reaching out to the Airports Authority to put in place, I wouldn't call it a booth, but at least a space for the local artisan to in fact put their products in. That hasn't been developed. The fact is that we have not reached out. Our perspective is that we would want those kind of artists to reach out, and there was one entity that reached out, and it never developed. Yes.
But as part, can it be part of a policy that if there's a particular store, that at least a certain percentage must be genuine local content? And apart from that, you reaching out, letting people know this is available, because a handicraft, a basket weaver in Tobago might know, well, there's an opportunity available for me here unless you make it known. So that's one of the things I want to encourage, because I like when I pass through to get something to take for persons away.
Right.
And then I'm very disappointed when I purchase and I flip it over. I'm like, shucks, is that another Chinese thing I buy, boy? You know, because you're thinking you're supporting local, you're thinking you're showcasing home, but really and truly it's just what's the right word, a facade? A facade? So I want to know, what's your strategy, what are your plans to ensure that our airport could be branded as one of the best for promoting local content, one of the best at promoting our artisans? So that proudly TT concept is reflected within our airport.
Chairman and member, we will in fact in our planning take it into consideration of how we could in fact talk to the entities as a part of their, and we could do it because it's a policy adjustments that we'll have to make, and that they will have to take into consideration a local content in terms of their thing. We'll do that.
I'm moving off from that and jumping back to something, and it's about HR, right? And before I make my comment, I want to really congratulate the airport police. That's what they call them, the airport security. Most of the 99.9% of the time, my interactions, positive. But I've noticed that sometimes when we have multiple aircraft, especially in Tobago, it's kind of small, and it gets busy, they tend to be overwhelmed. Do you have enough airport security? What's your recruitment plan? And also in terms of training? Because recently, unfortunately, we'd have seen in papers where some officers would have been charged for being engaged in, I think, illegal activities. So what are you doing to ensure that when we recruit the best, and we ensure that even while we recruit the best, that we ensure that they keep the performance levels and the integrity remains, as we say in Tobago, intact? I'm borrowing from a journalist home.
A number of questions. The first is in terms of the airport security. Within the last year or so, we have in fact been engaging, in addition to the estate constables, to do airport security, aviation screeners, young people who in fact have an interest in terms of doing that. We have in fact increased the qualification levels and stuff like that, and we have seen an improvement in terms of that. There's both in Tobago and Trinidad, we intend to in fact continue that. The challenge has been in Tobago is that we have had less people responding in terms of it. The other thing you raise in terms of the quality of the security in Tobago, I don't know. Yeah.
Sometimes when we have like multiple flights, so we might have a BA plus another one and it's busy.
Condor, yeah. Yes.
We may not have, but that's my perception. We may not have enough officers because the lines tend to be a bit long before you screen to go in, even on the domestic side. And they tend to be a bit flustered. Usually, I mean, the best, most friendly, loving people in Tobago and in Trinidad could pick up our airport security compared to what I've experienced elsewhere. But sometimes, I just noticed that sometimes when it gets really busy, so I'm asking if we have enough. And then the other question was, even after we recruit them, what are we doing to ensure that they remain true to their calling? Because I used the incidents of a couple of officers recently being charged, and how that reflects on the airport.
With respect to the question of the recruitment, I want to start there in terms of the quality. What we have within recent time also, we have amended the process in terms of someone being engaged in the security department, so to speak. So we have, in addition to the normal background and due diligence testing, we have also introduced polygraphing. We have introduced polygraphing at the level, and that has caused a challenge. Let me tell you the challenge. We have had a high failure rate. That has been a challenge, and it has affected our engagement in terms of the security department. And I want to say this, this is something I should say. One of the challenges that in Trinidad and Tobago that has happened is with respect of the decriminalization to an extent of marijuana. A lot of the potential engagement to get into the airport authority is a zero tolerance with respect to that, given our environment. And we have had to weed out a lot of people who otherwise would have been a good fit. And even in terms of the questioning, you pick it up in terms of the polygraph. All right? So that has been a challenge for us. And other entities that will be introducing polygraph, and that is a challenge that they will have to deal with. So that's one where we have attempted, and that's with the intervention of the Deputy Chairman, who in fact has insisted in certain things in terms of security. With respect to the question of the numbers in Tobago, perhaps Colonel, you could talk to that and talk to that for me, Colonel.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. So we are currently in the process of recruiting a number of aviation screening officers in Tobago. These are officers separate and apart from the traditional estate constable that we all accustomed seeing. As a matter of fact, at present, we're supposed to have approximately, it could be in the region of about 9 or 10 in Tobago right now who are doing on-the-job training. And that is a mandatory phase of their training that follows the classroom and practical work. So what you're going to start seeing at your screening points on a more regular basis is a mix of the traditional estate constable and the aviation screening officer. And they're going to be working in unison. We're doing the same exercise in Trinidad. We might be a little more advanced in terms of the numbers in Trinidad for some of the reasons that the general manager just outlined in terms of the response rate coming out of Tobago. But that is one of the major changes that we're going to be making. And the other thing that I want to mention, you asked a question specifically related to what we do to ensure the continued integrity of these officers once they get on board. We are required by our own aviation security program, and this is something that the local civil aviation authority audits us on to make sure that we comply. We are required to ensure that our officers go through repeated background checks. So you don't do a background check just as entry and that's the end of it. And we're currently ramping up to do some in the coming in this year, as a matter of fact, because it lapsed during COVID. All right, so that is one of the ways in which we try to ensure that the integrity and the quality of the person as it relates to their honesty and other areas, that those attributes are maintained.
I just want to say hats off in terms of customer service from my experience thus far. I want to commend the authority because your officers are by and large very pleasant, and I've observed them dealing with the public. Most times they don't recognize me because I dress anyhow to pass through, so they don't, and the experience has always been positive, so let me just say hats off to your officers in Tobago as well as at Piarco.
All right, just a comment on what our members have been kind of trying to get an answer or some action on. I'm seeing now in supermarkets and pharmacies, they are putting together local goods, really well packaged, very attractively done. So maybe you can go in. I'm not giving anybody any free advertisement, but just walk into any one of the larger pharmacies or supermarket chains, and you'll see soaps and honey and things. And I mean, the packaging is very attractive. You know, long ago we probably had a good product, but the packaging was poor. Now I think we are stepping up. But I just want to know, because you are not an organization in isolation, you really depend on other people. You know, you put the infrastructure, you may put a plant and equipment, human resource, but you depend on other people, the airlines, the ministry, tourism, etc. When you're working on your strategic plan, do you bring them in as stakeholders so you know where they are going? You know, because who goes out to kind of look, I don't want to, looking at the right word, but to search, on a search for like new airlines and what have you? Is it that, does that come, that push factor comes from the ministry, or it comes from you unilaterally? Or what happens if it is you're saying we need to, in terms of the revenue stream, we need more airlines coming in here? Is it that you look at a route and tell them, well, okay, if it is we are here in the Caribbean, you can come from this location here and then go that way? You look at it that way, where you try to plot, help them to push them in a particular direction? Do you do that?
Well, Chairman, member, first, in terms of the strat plans, there are going to be stakeholder engagement. All the stakeholders are going to be able to be part of our strategic planning process, the stakeholders we talk about. In terms of air services development, We have a services development program, the Airports Authority, in terms of encouraging airlines to participate both at PIACO and ANR. We best practice suggests that, in fact, in terms of that air services development, that we work together with the tourism agencies, whether it be the tourism agency in Tobago, the tourism Trinidad Limited. So we have been doing that. At the same time, there is also a crucial piece of work that is required in terms of, even before air services development, we must have, for scheduled flights, we must have air services development between air service agreements between the entities that we want to fly into Trinidad and Tobago.
So that's the Ministry of Works then.
So the Ministry of Works is crucial in terms of that.
But then you do some backward integration. You go and you say, okay, Emirates is interested. Can you do these are the steps? You know, and you do a critical part. You don't do something like that because it's your lifeblood.
We do. The PS and I sit down. We are part of the same committee in terms of the Standing Committee on Air Services Development. So some work has been done there already. I mean, you call Emirates, which is a good one to call because we have been quoting Emirates for a long period of time, and this thing takes there's a gestation period between a significant gestation period between when you talk to an airline and they actually come in. KLM, for instance, we talked to KLM for more than 5 to 7 years before they actually made the decision in terms of coming in. So that is work that has been done at the background, and we have been quoting a number of carriers out, both for Trinidad and Tobago, out of the United Kingdom, out of Scandinavia, in terms of both entities.
I'm happy you're stressing Tobago.
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's because you have two Tobago.
One thing the Airports Authority has done very seriously is that we take Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago very seriously.
Okay, but is it that when we have these peaks coming,
yes,
that the Ministry of Tourism, for instance, will give you a projection and say this is what we are aiming for? They do that?
Yes, that is done.
But then you start to cry when you see the numbers?
Well, let's cry sometime when I see the numbers for true, when it's not what we want. It's to be honest, because we see the airport as the commercial aspect of the airport is really important. There's a balancing act between this question of safety and security, but also being done on a commercial basis. So the question of passenger numbers is really crucial to us. All right. So you're right. We cry sometimes when we see numbers don't come to what it is. But I have to say that within recent time, the engagement with the tourism agency in Tobago, the engagement with Tourism Trinidad Limited, the engagement with the Ministry of Tourism has significantly improved, and I think we'll start to see the efforts of being borne out in terms of that.
Just briefly on your receivables.
Yes.
I went to the end of it and I noted, well, it's about 10 million. You have 10 million, I think. That is over 360 days. Could be wrong. Is that correct? In terms of the aging, but you have a receivables policy that speaks to maybe 25 days and what have you. You know, in terms of when you send your invoice and when you expect to be paid. But you have some aging that is probably well over 361 days. I think about 10 million of it. Is that heading towards write-off status? Because you also have a receivables committee. So you have, to me, I'm just saying, you don't have a lot of customers per se in terms of from the airline side. I don't know what you think about what you are doing at the airport itself. You know, but you have a receiver besides your accounts department and your head of finance, all of that. You have a receivables committee. I mean, you take these things seriously. But how it is you have this aging over 10 million, which probably is substantial for an organization your size. Are you going to write it off, or what are you going to do at 361 days, or over 300 days in any case, I think? How are you going to recover that?
Let me ask the financial controller to respond in terms of the details, in terms of the...
Some of the debtors over 365, those are court matters. We have them in court. They would have been coming forward since 2020, when a number of the tenants would have left, or prior to 2020. Some of them are prior to 2020, when they would have vacated the premises. So we have a lot of these issues in court. And some of the older ones, it's the same thing. Some of the tenants, they've been holding over since 2020, where we had the border closure on the March 23rd. Some of them have been holding over. We've been trying to work with them. When the airport reopened, we've been trying to work with them to get their debts down. And we're still trying to get them in a place where the business relationship is positive for the authority and for them. And we are working with them, and we are on, yes, the receivables policy is strict and it states certain and specific stipulations, but because of that situation with COVID and restriction on passenger movement, and we were closed for a very long period, we have had to work with some of our tenants. A lot of these are the local tenants. They've been struggling. And because they are the local tenants, we want to work with them and keep them in the authority and keep their business. So we are aware of the debt, the volume, and we are aware of the length of time, but we really want to work with them and try to get their debts down and see how best we can help them progress.
Okay, Chairman, my last question. A member of the media has asked that I pose this question, so this is not my question, I'm just telling you. And they're asking whether the renaming of the airport is currently before you as an act for active consideration.
No, it's not before us. In any event, as the airport operator, as the management and the board of the airport's authority, the naming of the airport is really for the owners of the airport to determine. So it's really not something before us.
All right. Well, okay. I was just asked to ask you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
All right, if I may to continue some further questions. In terms of the business continuity, based on the information you provided to us, the Airport Authority provided to us, there was a situation where by end of 2021, you expected to recertify the airport for ISO 14001. Correct. In your correspondence, you said that you had deferred that to 2023. Given that we spoke about the calendar year and so on before, 2023 is now completed. Has the airport achieved both PACO International and ANR Robinson International as well? Have both of those received this certification? No. Given that ISO 14001 is about environmental management system, the establishment of environmental management system, with efficient use of resources, reduction of waste, etc. Given the international context where climate change and global warming and those kind of considerations are a factor, don't you think it is important? Now, I'm raising that in the context that the reasoning for not having pursued that certification, ISO certification, in the previous 2021 and up to 2023 was because of the absence of internal funding. That's the reason that you gave to us, that you did not have sufficient funds to pursue the ISO certification 14,001. Has that changed? Have you in fact pursued and achieved the certification? And if you have not, what is the key back now?
We commenced the work in 2023. We recommenced the work with respect to the certification. Let me just give a background. ISO 14001 certification was one that was in fact achieved at ANR Robinson back in 2013 or 2014.
Correct. 2013.
The work in terms of doing the recertification process, it's a fairly complicated process. But in addition to us doing the internal work in terms of the internal teams, we need to ensure that there's an entity in Trinidad which is in fact able to oversee what we are doing. When we approached the Bureau of Standards, they did not have the certification to do it. So we had to, in fact, find an international provider. When it was done initially for ANR Robinson, they got the support of the European Union. It was a European Union-funded project, and the European Union provided the oversight. We are at the stage where we are doing all the internal works, both for PACO and ANR, but I also require an international oversee in terms of it. So that's where we are. We are doing the work. In 2024, we intend to finalize the work by obtaining an international provider, because Bureau of Standards says they can't do.
What
That's
kind
how
of,
we'll be doing it.
going back to your advising us that
Yes.
funding was the issue, because I did not get in your correspondence to us that
Yes.
it was anything other than funding, a lack of funding. Suggesting that there may have been a consideration for a local overseer.
As a part of the process, you need an overseer, and there's
I take that.
none locally.
I take that.
Yeah.
But you had in Tobago, even by your own statement just now,
Yeah.
in Tobago, you had certification
Yes.
based on the European Union.
European Union
involvement.
funded.
So in theory, that was just to update, to renew, to proceed.
The process is not an update. It's a full recertification. It's a exercise where you go back through everything that is in fact done.
And have you reached
Yeah.
back out to European Union or any other entity for support in getting this done?
We have, but the European Union is going beyond that in terms of that funding. So we will have we have budgeted for the funding in terms of 2024 to do what we required in terms of getting the support.
All right. That too would have been based on some other questions I had with regards to other revenue. In our brief and in your comments to us, there were several references to the Airports Authority being able to focus on other sources of revenue. You used very nice language, which I can't seem to find now, in terms of the description of the other revenue.
Non-aeronautical.
Sorry?
Non-aeronautical.
Non-aeronautical, very nice, yes. Can you advise whether or not any of that has been proceeded with? Have you been targeting other non-aeronautical?
We have.
Have you been pursuing any other sort of revenue sources?
Yeah, we have in fact developed expression of interest, which in accordance together with the Ministry of Works and Transport, with respect to the lands, the northern lands, the lands were the Aero Park. So we are pursuing. We have some projects that we are looking at with respect to the expression of interest. In addition to that, we also have actually going up right now actively. We have one of the anchor projects in terms of a Sheraton 4 Points hotel that is in fact being constructed in the northern area, the Aero Park area. The construction period is one where we expect to finalize a substantial completion of the project by the end of this year.
All right, so I appreciate that, and I'm hopeful that 2024 then would create a situation where there's substantial movement towards new revenue sources.
Yes.
That is, I think, critical for the expansion of the Airports Authority's function and role that you are envisaging there. Just as a passing, one of those new sources of revenue, in fact, I think if you pursue it effectively enough, it is an almost immediate, easy, low-hanging fruit. Is the cultural issues you were talking about, the paintings, the artisan work, etc., the soups, etc.
Yeah.
So that is, in fact, I think, a low-hanging fruit, especially bearing in mind that by your own statement, you have some vacant spaces existing, available for rent, etc. Yep?
Agreed, Chairman. Thank you.
Sure.
Seasonally, at least once, I've seen someone playing the steel pan. Perhaps it was around carnival time. But I have been welcomed to other countries in the Caribbean. And I've been resentful to see I was being welcomed with a steel pan. And, I was so bold enough to tell the official, I could take our thing here, and bring it in. Of course, I have no authority to do that. So I'm just wondering if you couldn't have that on a more regular basis, because we have so much talent in Trinidad and Tobago. And I really feel upset when I see what other countries are doing that we can do and do better, and we are not doing it. So that all the costumes that we throw away every year, or we put, mothballing and so on, perhaps you could, provide some spaces to beautify the place at the same time, as well as show off how good we are. We are a great country, We're just keeping it a little too hidden. So let's see what can happen. I want to ask you something. That when we were having our conference, remember we were talking at that time in 2022.
Yes.
There was an issue where you had to cancel some flights because of there was a risk. Something had happened, and you had to cancel a lot of flights from, we couldn't get out from Tobago. There was something that happened at the airport in Trinidad. Do you remember?
Was it a bomb?
It was a bomb skip. You were on that flight. What was it?
That wasn't us. That was
No, it wasn't.
It was
So they lied to us then.
It wasn't the Airports Authority.
If I may, I have a couple more questions. Again, based on your submissions to us, there was an internal audit done in 2023. I believe it was in November 2023. And in that internal audit, there were several findings. One, for example, and they all seem to treat with a risk, a substantial, in fact, it was listed as the risk rating was listed as significant. And those significant risks created the space for the possible misappropriation of funds, inaccurate financial recording, which could also have caused reputational damage to the Airports Authority. So I'm asking the question based on the concern we have with regards to not just the risk of misappropriation of funds, but also for the reputational risk of the Airports Authority. You had provided several findings, risks, and recommendations. The findings, I'll give you one example, or two examples. Non-documentation of cash reconciliation to bank statement at the Tobago Revenue of Collection Unit. That was one listed as a significant risk of misappropriation of funds, etc. Two, supervisory review. The finding was there was a supervisory review of the matching reconciliation sheets which received entries against bank statements not seen at South and North Terminal Revenue Collections Unit. The risk was that errors and omissions of cash receipt transactions may occur if review is not performed by authorized personnel, and that too has the opportunity and the possibility of a misappropriation of cash. And so there were several such identified risks, and you made several such recommendations. And that came in your report to us following the internal audit review, November 2022. We are now in January 2024. So my question, there would have been a corrective action plan to treat with the problems that your internal audit identified as critical. I mean, it was significant because there was risk, like I said, to misappropriation of funds and to reputation. Has that corrective action plan been fully implemented between when these problems were identified in November 2022? We are now in, like I said, January 24, sorry. So 23 has passed. 1 year plus has passed since the identification of these problems in the internal audit. Have those issues been properly treated with and addressed? Are you familiar with what I'm speaking about, the internal audit?
That would have been a report that would have been done by the internal audit department, and we would have had to respond as the management to the findings, and we would have developed an action plan, right? So what I would want the financial controller, if she has the information at her disposal, to in fact respond with respect to it.
Sure. Ma'am?
With respect to the significant findings, the first one was that there was no matching of the receipts to the bank statement. This is not in relation to bank reconciliations. I must say all of our bank reconciliations are up to date. They are up to November 2023, and very soon they will be up to December 2023. What the internal audit here is referring to is the matching of receipts directly to the bank statements by the supervisors, because what happened is all of our receipts are manual. So what the supervisor does is she would match each manual receipt to the deposit on the bank statement to ensure that they were recorded in the bank and that there are no issues. This is prior to the bank reconciliation being done, because even if the supervisor misses a receipt, it will be picked up in the bank reconciliation process. So what we were doing in the North Terminal, because of the volume of transactions, 98% of the transactions comes out of Piaco International Airport because of the volume and the size of the volume of traffic. So what she does is she would match each individual receipt to deposits and then match that to the bank statement. That was not being done in the Tobago airport because the volume of transactions are very small. She does this on Excel and she does it manually to ensure that everything is accounted for before the bank reconciliation process starts, because we want that process to be as smooth as possible and to ensure we have no queries with the bank. So what we have started to do...
Ma'am, one moment, please, sorry to interrupt, but have you all considered the possibility of a computerized receipting system?
Yes.
Which should make that a little bit more effective and efficient?
Yes, what we are doing, we are working with the IT department to do our receipts on the system. They have been looking at a lot of options. We have been even looking at our current accounting system and to determine how best we could facilitate the automated receipts, right? So this is what she does, and we now do it in Tobago. The other issue that they brought up would have been with relation to our admin center. Our admin center, we also have a small cashier's unit, and because the volume of as well is small, we were not doing that matching, but we are now doing it because the majority of the volume comes through the airport terminal itself. But we are also now doing it at the admin. And the other significant finding that they brought up in relation, all of it is in relation to that matching with receipts to the deposits and the bank statement prior to it being done, the bank reconciliation process being done. So we did listen to them, and what we are doing in the North Terminal, we are now doing also at the admin center and also in Tobago.
Thank you. Earlier, sorry.
Earlier, sir, Mr. Chairman, through you, there was talk of a mention of rental of spaces, that many have been rented and they are available spaces. Let me ask you something. Do you have full autonomy in terms of to whom you rent spaces? Or not? Would you say that complaints about favoritism are greatly exaggerated or misconceived or mischievous even? What is your response?
My response is that we follow a process in terms of the question of the rental of spaces. In the best example would have been, and that is documented in terms of our policy in terms of leasing of spaces. But the best example would have been as late as last year, was it November, December? We went to the public with respect to an RFP process for spaces at the terminal, and at both terminals, at A&R Robinson and at Piaco.
Are you saying full autonomy at the end of the day?
Yes.
I think this may be my last question. General, I'm sure some follow-up questions will come from it. We spoke earlier about some outstanding, when we were talking about the other revenue sources and outstanding, we were talking about debts generally, and we spoke about some court matters that we were looking at. Can you advise whether or not the Airports Authority currently has, well, there are two questions. Do you currently have persons in court pursuing, let me say it differently, are you currently pursuing legal action against individuals or institutions to recover funding, including some of your receivables? Are you currently pursuing legal action in that regard? So that's one side of the question, and the other side of the question is whether or not there are legal actions pending for which you would have had to make provisions in your accounts.
We are pursuing legal actions, and there are legal actions pending too.
Can you give us a bit more detail, or would that be?
Could I provide it in writing to?
Sure. So just as a follow-up question to that, one of the questions that we would have raised is the operations of the efficiency. As I indicated, I remember the date now. It was actually the 27th of December when I spent a couple hours outside the recovery area, trying to waiting on my relatives. But there are other airports have used, and I'm glad we were talking about the comparisons about what other airports have done. And we raised the issue earlier about the filling of the counters to expedite travel entry. Now, you indicated that this was not your real responsibility because that falls to the remit of the border control, effectively. My question to you, sir, is what other measures have you all taken, has the Airports Authority taken over the period under review here, which would have been a substantial period, but what other measures have you taken to expedite the influx of people? Because you can, in terms of the speed to travel through the airport, because I've traveled quite a bit, just like we all have, and we would have seen other mechanisms being used in international airports to fast-track processes, including the ease of which you can deposit luggage in advance, the ease of which you can get your own luggage tabs, and the ease of use of your passports to expedite your access to and from the airport, from the enclosure. So my question to you is, what specific mechanisms have you put in place, or are you planning to put in place, to use that kind of technology, the specific technology, to expedite the customer, to improve the customer experience at the airport, rather than we having these very long lines where you stand and wait for somebody to come and stamp your passport?
Chairman, what I could talk about is what is within our remit. With great respect, I can't talk about what is for the border control agencies. I've been formally advised that it's beyond my remit. So in terms of the Airports Authority, we could talk about the check-in process where we have introduced kiosks, and we intend to, in 2024, we will be introducing a better system in terms of bag drops. I could talk about the fact that in terms of the lines at security, we intend to, in fact, introduce in 2024, first quarter 24 by March. I'm giving you a month, March, we'll be introducing a fast track in terms of security as exists in terms of the United States and stuff like that. That is coming in, right? Those are areas that are directly under our control. With respect to the areas that are not directly under our control, we will continue to move to try to assist the border control agencies, both customs and immigration, with respect to utilizing technology to try to improve what is happening. What we have started to do is to share the reports of the surveys that we do, the ASQ surveys, which shows in terms of the metric that those are the touch points, those are the areas that are regarded as a challenge for PIACO and ANR, right? An objective entity is telling us that. We'll be using that data to show those agencies that we could do things differently. Technology, and we are, as you say, we are benchmarking with other airports. So it really is a point which is hurtful to us because the technology exists and we don't have it at all in this jurisdiction.
Final question, absolute final, for me anyway. Do you do customer service? Surveys?
Yes.
So when I walk through the airport, I get a form that says, let me know what you think about A, B, C, D, rank me. When was your last survey?
We participate in the Airport Council International ASQ survey, which is a survey that is done independent of the Airports Authority. And the last survey that was done is for the last quarter of the third quarter of the results of the third quarter of 2023 exist. In that survey, the reports are saying that, in fact, in terms of customer satisfaction in the various touch points, we achieved, out of 5, we achieved a score of 4, so we are at about 80% in terms of customer satisfaction. The things that they looked at in terms of that survey, the 5 key areas they suggested that PIACO and, well, ANR isn't participating yet. Because of the work that has been done in the ANR, we didn't include the ANR. Right? The areas that, the performance categories that they suggest as touch points that we must pay attention to, ease of wayfinding in terms of the check-in area, comfort while waiting at the gate, ease of going through security, ease of getting to the airport, and of course the question of the aesthetics and the cleanliness and stuff like that. Those are the areas that they've said to us that we need to be focusing on to improve our score. So we are up on terms of.
And theoretically, your strat plan is going to incorporate your addressing
measures
all
to
of
deal
those
with
issues.
all of these.
Excellent. Colleagues, do we have any more questions? My colleague here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's funny that you mentioned the categories, because I just logged on to the ParlView, and one of the first comments that I saw was about the cleanliness. And the person must be rating the conditions of the washroom facilities, right? So that's one thing I want to point out. The other thing I want to point, these are just general comments, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. The other thing I want to point out, as I said, back and forth between Trinidad and Tobago frequently. One time when I came up, I saw somebody who was working airport authority, and I said, please contact somebody in Trinidad and tell them to try and mop us on it, because flies was killing everybody on the airport. I don't know if it's a seasonal thing or what, but sometimes it's just overbearing. The other thing I want to ask about, is there a particular reason why from the terminal to the plane in Crown Point is so rough? Because in PIACO it's not that bad, other airports is not that bad, and me traveling back and forth frequently, all my heels getting damaged up. Is it a particular reason, or is it just that we're just not doing it, fixing it, smoothing it out a bit?
The particular reason is that it needs to be fixed. We have it planned for this year.
Because my promise to myself this year was to bring all my shoes and ask you all to pay for it. And I'm not the only person. Other persons complain about it as well, right? And the other thing I want to raise, and this is based on, I said, back and forth, and I engage with people who recognize me, so people talk around me. I remember one time we were leaving to get on the airplane, right? And they parked the plane Kwaito, and we had to walk Kwaito. And then I complained to my colleague who was a pilot, and he said, well, we don't determine where is airport authority. So I'm like, if it is that we are the last flight, then why do you have us walking all that distance? You have old people struggling. You know, those are some of the things, I don't know, because you don't have to do it constantly, but people who do it frequently, to be honest, who have to travel, we feel the pressure. We understand it. So those are some of the things I want you all to really take into consideration. But other than that, I want to say hats off to the work that you all have been doing thus far, and just encourage you to continue doing the good work. But the little things I point out, the little bugbears,
we need to improve.
Would really go a long way in helping us to get even greater scores. Thanks.
Following on her comments about the bathrooms, there's a remarkable difference between the first set of bathrooms you meet and those that near the luggage area. Like, it's been ignored. You know, when you get there, like you're saying, oh, all reach inside already, I don't care about all anymore. You know, so let's see if you can have both of them, running as clean and efficient, We'll
do that.
So you'll work on that for us.
We'll do that.
Especially for the ladies.
I have a question that was just raised with me, if I may. There's a concern with regards to the parking and the fact that persons, I remember I used to be able to pay at the gate, at the parking area, and now you have to demit your car. So I could have driven in, stayed in my car, and waited for the person arriving to come and meet me at my car and then demit. Now I'm required to leave the car and go into the terminal to make the payment. That is, it is a little bit tedious, because it seems to be that it's an easy process to have a computerized payment system at the gate of the car park. And even to put a personnel there, is it because of security concerns or because that was the system and we've now shifted to inside?
I could say something that is it was a particular challenge for us. Because based upon the customer feedback, same feedback in terms of that. So what we have done is that we have acquired equipment, and by January, the end of January, you will be able to start back to pay. There will be apps on the phone, and we getting those new technology in terms and there'll be. So while there will be two machines in the terminal, but you'll also be able to pay at the gates, and you'll also be able to pay on the apps. So those things will be in place. That's one of what we do is we try to respond to as much as possible in terms of what these surveys has been saying in terms of the challenges, and that's where we. Yeah.
All right. Since we have no more questions from on our end, sorry, we have no more questions from your committee at this point. It falls to me to thank you all very much, Ministry of Works, Airports Authority, and the Auditor General's Department. I know the Auditor General's Department is very disappointed that we did not target them some more. I will work on that. But I want to thank the representatives of the three institutions that have been here today for providing as much information as possible to the general public. I also want to use the opportunity to thank the listening and viewing audience and for their participation as well. It is my hope, it is our hope that as we have won the best airport in the Caribbean, that's a step in the direction that we would like to go. And some of the suggestions I think that were made here today will definitely take us into being one of those airports that those institutions can now target and hope that they can aspire towards. We look forward to 2024. You have identified quite a few positive initiatives that I think, should they come to bear, should they start to happen, my colleague would not be put at a serious risk of twisting her ankle when she's walking to the plane. But also some of these new ideas will bring the airport into a better stature, into a higher stature. I thank you all for your frankness in answering questions. I know some of the questions may have been a bit tedious, but I really do appreciate the fact that you saw, as we did, that our role and function is to provide as much information as possible to the listening and viewing public, but also to try to find out what your issues are and how we can best treat with them as an entity towards the improvement of the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and generally for the benefit of the citizens of our country. I thank you all very much. At this point in time, we will suspend the public hearing to facilitate our colleagues to leave us, and then we will continue the discussions in-house here. I thank you all again very much. Go home safe.